Hare Krishna, thank you for joining today. We'll start with Radha Madhava. I'll just start by saying the English translation. So Krishna is the lover of Radha. He displays many amorous pastimes in the grove of Vrindavana. He is the lover of cowherd maidens of Vraja, the holder of the great hill named Govardhana, the beloved son of Mother Yashoda, the delighter of the inhabitants of Vraja, and he wanders in the forest along the banks of the river Yamuna. Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Thank you, everyone. So we're going to turn to page 1 of the introduction and start with the honoring of the spiritual master. Om Jnana Timirandhyasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Next page, second verse. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhaktavrinda. I offer my obeisances to Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara, Shivas, and all others in the line of devotion. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, thank you, everyone. So now we will turn to chapter 9, verse 1, which is entitled The Most Confidential Knowledge. So we'll start by reciting the verse, and then I'll ask if anyone would like to recite afterwards. And if you could please put your phone on silent, because if your phone rings, I will ask you to stand up and recite the verse. All right, thank you. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Idam tu te guhayatam.
Idam te tu guhyatmanam.
Pravakshami anusuvayave.
Pravakshyami anasuyave.
Jnanam Vijnanam Sahitam.
Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam.
Yajnatva Mokshasye Subhat.
Yajnatva Mokshase Subhat.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Idam tu te goyat atmam.
Idam te guhyatmanam.
Pravikshyami anusuyave.
Pravikshyami anusuyave.
Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam. Yajnatva Mokshase Shubhat. Would anyone like to recite?
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Idam tu te guhyatmanam. Pravakshyami anusuyave. Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam. Yajnatva Mokshase Subhat.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Idam tu te guhyatamam.
Idam tu te guhyatmamam.
Pravakshyami anusuyave.
Pravakshyami anasuyave.
Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam.
Jnana Vijnana Sahitam.
Yajnatva Mokshase Shubhat.
Yajnatva Mokshase Subhat.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Idam tu te guhyatam.
Idam te guhyatmamam.
Pravakshayam anusuyave.
Pravakshyami anusuyave.
Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam.
Jnana Vijnana Sahitam.
Yajnatva Mokshase Shubhat.
Yajnatva Mokshase Subhat.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Idam tu te guhyatamam.
Idam tu te guhyatamam.
Pravakshyami anusuyave.
Pravakshyami anusuyave.
Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam.
Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam.
Yajnatva Mokshase Subhat.
Yajnatva Mokshase Subhat.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll do the word for word translation. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said,
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, idam,
this,
this,
tu,
but,
te,
te,
unto you, guyatamam, the most confidential,
the most confidential.
Pravakshyami, I am speaking, Anasuyave, to the non-envious,
to the non-envious.
Jnanam,
Jnanam,
knowledge,
Vijnana,
realized knowledge,
realized knowledge.
Sahitam,
With
Yat, which Jnatva, knowing, Mokshase, you will be released, Ashubhat, from this miserable material existence. Okay, translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence." Purport. As a devotee hears more and more about the Supreme Lord, he becomes enlightened. This hearing process is recommended in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The messages of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are full of potencies, and these potencies can be realized if topics regarding the Supreme Godhead are discussed amongst devotees. This cannot be achieved by the association of mental speculators or academic scholars, for it is realized knowledge. The devotees are constantly engaged in the Supreme Lord's service. The Lord understands the mentality and sincerity of a particular living entity who is engaged in Krishna consciousness and gives him the intelligence to understand the science of Krishna in the association of devotees. Discussion of Krishna is very potent, and if a fortunate person has such association, he tries to assimilate the knowledge, and then he will surely make advancement towards spiritual realization. Lord Krishna, in order to encourage Arjuna to higher and higher elevation in his potent service, describes this 9th chapter, matters more confidential than any he has already disclosed. The very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, the 1st chapter, is more or less an introduction to the rest of the book. And in the 2nd and 3rd chapters, the spiritual knowledge described is called confidential. Topics discussed in the 7th and 8th chapters are specifically related to devotional service, and because they bring enlightenment in Krishna consciousness, they are called more confidential. But the matters which are described in the 9th chapter deal with unalloyed pure devotion. Therefore, this is called the most confidential. One who is situated in the most confidential knowledge of Krishna is naturally transcendental. He therefore has no material pangs, although he is in the material world. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it is said that although one has a sincere desire to render loving service to the Supreme Lord, is situated in the conditional state of material existence. He is said to be considered liberated. Similarly, we shall find in the Bhagavad Gita 10th chapter that anyone who is engaged in that way is a liberated person. Now this verse has specific significance. The words idam jnanam, this knowledge, refer to pure devotional service, which consists of 9 different activities: hearing, chanting, remembering, serving, worshipping, praying, obeying, maintaining friendship, and surrendering everything. By the practice of these 9 elements of devotional service, one is elevated to spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness. When one's heart is thus cleared of material contamination, one can understand the science of Krishna, Simply to understand that the living entity is not material is not sufficient. That may be the beginning of spiritual realization, but one should recognize the difference between the activities of the body and the spiritual activities of one who understands that he is not the body. In the 7th chapter, we have already discussed the opulent potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his different energies, the inferior and superior natures, and all this material manifestation. Now in chapter 9, the glories of the Lord will be delineated. The Sanskrit word anasuyave in this verse is also very significant. Generally, the commentators, and even the highly scholarly, are all envious of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even the most erudite scholars write on the Bhagavad Gita very inaccurately because they are envious of Krishna. Their commentaries are useless. The commentaries given by devotees of the Lord are bona fide. No one can explain Bhagavad Gita or give perfect knowledge of Krishna if he is envious. One who criticizes the character of Krishna without knowing him is a fool. So such commentaries should be very carefully avoided. For one who understands that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the pure and transcendental personality, these chapters will be very beneficial. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay, thank you everyone for joining. I will give a few comments on this verse. This is my first class at the ISKCON Sunday program for my own purification, so thank you the Stouffville management for this opportunity, and thank you Bhakta Ramesh for introducing me. That was lovely. So the first thing to discuss here is that this is the introduction. This verse is the introduction to chapter 9. And chapter 9 is very significant, being called the most confidential knowledge. So as we know, most valuable things are generally not openly exposed. So pearls are hidden within a shell. A king is surrounded by soldiers. In the same way, the essence of the Bhagavad Gita is hidden in the middle of Krishna and Arjuna's conversation. So when I was first explained, when somebody told me about Bhagavad Gita, they mentioned that it's a conversation between Arjuna and Krishna. And that person told me to, when I'm reading, to imagine that I'm Arjuna and I'm asking the questions. Because this is all a conversation of Arjuna asking Krishna questions in a very humble way and receiving the answers. So in that way, chapter 9 is the essence and the most important of the whole conversation. Krishna outlines here the king of all knowledge and the most secret of all knowledge. In Sanskrit, that's known as Raja Vidyam Guhyam Vidya, which is also the Sanskrit name of this chapter. Here is explained the essence of Bhagavad Gita, which is guiding us to that which fulfills us in the deepest core of our hearts. So coming to the purport, so if we look at the purport again, actually we're going to read the translation first and take 3 main takeaways from the translation. So the translation says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence." So the first thing to point out here is that Krishna is initiating the conversation in this chapter. If you look at many other chapters, it starts with a question from Arjuna. So this is very unique that Krishna himself is giving the answer without being questioned by Arjuna. Okay, so that's point number 1. My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me. So what does that mean? So one should be non-envious to hear properly. The Sanskrit word is anasuyave, non-envious. So faith is a prerequisite to receiving the knowledge. I'll just say that one more time. Faith is a prerequisite to receive the knowledge. What does prerequisite mean? Does anyone want to participate? Feel free to participate and ask questions.
So prerequisite is basically,
Yes.
my humble opinion, the readiness to receive the
Knowledge.
Yeah, but in the mundane world, when would you need a prerequisite?
It's a
Ah,
In the
prerequisite.
material.
You have to do that requirement to receive something before you have to provide
Exactly, yeah. So typically when you go to college or university,
Yeah.
you need to have a prerequisite GPA or you need to have a prerequisite number of courses. So here, being non-envious or having faith is a prerequisite for receiving the knowledge. And how do we know and how can we prove that we are serious and non-envious in order to receive the knowledge? Does anyone have any ideas?
Unconditional faith.
Yeah, Shraddha or unconditional faith.
Bhakti.
Bhakti, Vishwas, okay. How did Arjuna prove that he was non-envious? Does anyone have any ideas? Submissive, okay. Does anyone know in which chapter or which verse he became a disciple of Krishna?
I think second chapter.
Yes, you're right. Does anyone know which verse? Yeah, so it's verse 2.7, where Arjuna accepted Krishna as a spiritual master. So that's a very important thing to point out here, because Krishna would not have imparted the most confidential knowledge unless and until Arjuna has accepted him in a non-envious way with faith. So it's a very important lesson for all of us that in order to prove we are non-envious, we need to show we are serious and we need to accept a spiritual master as well. It's a very important step in spiritual progression to understand the most confidential knowledge. Okay. So then the next part is, I shall impart to you, looking at the translation, the most confidential knowledge and realization. So here we're talking about jnanam and vijnanam. Does anyone know what the difference is between jnanam and vijnanam?
Jnana means knowledge.
Yes. And what is vijnanam?
Like knowledge.
Applied, yes. So not only is Krishna imparting knowledge, but he's also imparting applied, how to apply that knowledge, which is even more important, one can argue. And when Krishna is mentioning idam jnanam vijnanam, or this knowledge and realization, what type of knowledge is he referring to?
Spiritual knowledge.
Spiritual knowledge or bhakti. So Krishna is talking here about pure unalloyed devotion. When we talk about pure unalloyed devotion or bhakti, this word unalloyed is a word that Prabhupada used very, very commonly throughout the Bhagavad Gita. Does anyone know exactly what unalloyed mean and what is the etymology of this word?
Generally, an
Let's
alloy
do it
is
now.
a combination of two metals, so unalloyed would mean that it is pure. It's not
Yes.
No,
Thank you.
contaminated by other
It's a
things.
pure one. It's not mixing anything.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
the best
thank you.
example will be when you get an insurance contract.
Yeah.
It comes with so many terms and conditions,
Yeah.
so many strings are attached.
No disclaimer.
Unalloyed means no strings
No
attached.
disclaimers, yeah.
No
Yeah,
disclaimer.
it's basically no mixture.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you, Bhaktin, Chanchal, and everyone else. So Chanchal gave the correct answer that alloy is a mixture of two metals. So this is the dictionary definition of an alloy. So something which is unalloyed is a completely pure metal. So for example, we can give the example of gold. So there can be like pure gold, and then gold can also be mixed with other alloys to make it, a different carat or white gold. It's mixed with cadmium and different types of mixtures. But pure gold is unalloyed. Okay, so we want our bhakti or our devotion to be unalloyed, not mixed with anything else. So what does that mean? Not mixed with karma, not mixed with jnana, not mixed with jnana, the other types of yoga which are discussed in the first 6 chapters. All right. So then after that, when we go into the translation, the most important part here is that Krishna says that once Arjuna knows this knowledge and realization, he shall be relieved of all miseries of material existence. So isn't that what we all want? We all want to be relieved of the miseries of material existence. Does anyone know what the 3-fold miseries are, as described in the Bhagavad Gita? Yeah, go ahead, Bhaktarma. Yes. Yes. So just to repeat, Adi Devik, and what does that mean? Material nature, yes. So like hurricanes, floods. So there's 3 types of miseries. The first one, or one of them, being Adi Devik. So these are the miseries caused by the demigods or material nature. So hurricanes, floods, like in Canada, we have very cold weather, very hot weather in the summer. So we are trying to relieve ourselves of this suffering. And what was the second one you mentioned?
Adi Bhautik.
Okay, Adi Bhautik, and what does that mean?
Which is caused by our own senses or past karmas.
Yeah, so Bhautik is that caused by others. Yeah. Adi Atmik is the one which is our own. Yeah, very close, very good job. So Adi Bhautik is miseries caused by other people. So we all know people in our life that I'm sure caused us misery at one point or another, or if that never happened, then it may happen in the future. So there will be always some miseries caused by other people or other living entities. It may not even be a person, it could be another animal, right? So some people have misery caused by spiders, like me, that's me. Some people have misery caused by other people or other animals. And the last one is Adi Atmik, which is the misery caused by your own self. So even if you don't have misery caused by the material nature, you don't have misery caused by other people, you may have misery caused by your own self. So in order to relieve ourselves of all of these 3-fold miseries, Krishna is giving us the answer in this chapter, in this most confidential knowledge. So if that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what does. All right, so the 3 key takeaways, well, first of all, let's say for each paragraph here. So now we went into the translation in a lot of detail, okay? So the first paragraph, Srila Prabhupada here mentions that hearing is very important, as well as discussing, right? So he says hearing and discussing amongst devotees. So what does hearing mean? Hearing means Shravanam, which is the first process in devotional service. But Shravanam does not only mean listening to talks like you are today. It also means reading spiritual knowledge, spiritual literature, which helps you gain knowledge, okay? So if everybody has a Bhagavad Gita at home, that's great. But if you don't, please take a Bhagavad Gita home today, because it's very important to hear or read spiritual knowledge. That's the first step in any type of devotional service. So the next thing which is discussed is discussing amongst devotees, which leads to realization. So kirtanam is also discussing. A lot of times we think kirtanam is just singing or chanting, but kirtanam is also explaining and discussing. So one who is explaining amongst their family members or even explaining amongst other devotees is also considered a way of glorifying the Lord. Because the root of kirtanam is kirti, and kirti means glorification. Okay, so hearing means gaining knowledge, and kirtanam means gaining realization. Because remember we talked about it's about knowledge and realization both. So the hearing is gaining gyan, or knowledge, and the kirtanam is gaining realization. Because it's even known in the material world that the highest form of learning is actually explaining or teaching to others. So if you can explain any topic to others, that is when you actually have realized it, you've internalized it, okay? And something which is advised against in the first paragraph is association of mental speculators or academic scholars. So Prabhupada clearly says here that this knowledge and realization cannot be achieved by association of mental speculators and academic scholars. So we need to stay clear of that in relation to spiritual knowledge. We will have very difficult time progressing spiritually if we are associating with these type of people or listening on Bhagavad Gita from these type of people. So very important when you're listening about Bhagavad Gita or spiritual topics that you listen from a bona fide practitioner in the line of Sampradaya or in the traditional line. If you listen to a mundane scholar, you may get a totally different interpretation. And this is actually, I relate to this quite a bit because when I was in high school, I was seeking for spiritual knowledge. And I went to my general high school library. And I didn't know much, but I knew I was interested to learn more about Hinduism, so-called Hinduism or spirituality. And I got a book that was about Upanishads, but it was written from a general scholar. And it was very difficult. I just read the first couple of pages and it was difficult for me to understand. And I got a completely different kind of wrong meaning from the literature, which I much later realized was completely not in the mode of goodness, and it was not spiritual at all. So it's very important when we are looking to gain knowledge that we go from the bona fide sources, and Srila Prabhupada's Gita as it is written by a practitioner who is actually practicing Bhakti Yoga or the devotional service. If you read a translation of Bhagavad Gita, which is written by a scholar, it's basically like taking a calculus class from the professor who does not believe in mathematics or does not believe in calculus. How can you actually learn or absorb, or how can that person teach you if he doesn't himself believe in the science of calculus, right? So we want to learn from somebody who has actually internalized the knowledge himself or herself and is able to explain it. All right, so moving on to the second paragraph here. So the second paragraph, Srila Prabhupada mentions a formula of 3 things. So he said, if you have the correct mentality, sincerity, and association, that leads to the intelligence to understand Krishna. So 3 very important things: mentality, sincerity, and association. So how do we get the correct mentality? Does anyone know which chapter of the Bhagavad Gita discusses mentality? I'll give you a hint. Mentality refers to the mind. Yes, who said 6? Very good job. So it's chapter 6, Dhyan Yoga. So Dhyan Yoga means yoga of concentration, which deals with the mind. How do you deal with the mind, could be your best friend, could be your enemy? How do you deal with your mind that is more difficult to control than the wind? This is all explained in chapter 6, okay? Second thing, sincerity. Does anyone know which chapters relate to sincerity specifically? Yeah, good. Yeah, so 7 and 8. 7 and 8 deal with sincerity. So how do we be sincere and have the faith in Krishna? So we learn more about how to be sincere. And sincere, what does that mean? It means to be not contaminated. It means unalloyed. So sincere is similar to unalloyed. Not be contaminated with any other thoughts, be pure. And association. So association is actually mentioned 3 times in the first 2 paragraphs, which means that devotee association is very, very important, extremely important. And one thing which I'd like to mention is that when we are forming a relationship with Krishna, for instance, we chant his name through the Mahamantra. Okay? So when we are developing relationship with devotees, if you're seeing these devotees every day or every week, then we should know their names. I think it's very important that we should know each other's names. So this is one thing I've observed in my personal experience, that when I go to ISKCON temple, that most people will call each other by generic words, okay? Like Prabhuji or Mataji. So this is fine, you're showing respect, which is fine. However, if we want to develop sincere relationship with our devotees, we should at least learn their name and also address them by their name, and then we can add, whatever Prabhu or whatever the person prefers to be addressed at the end of the name. But at least take some time to learn people's names, because at the end of the day, we are a personalist society, we're not impersonalists. So personalist means everybody has their own individuality. So we want to know everyone as an individual, we want to know their names. If we are impersonalists, that means everyone is the same, but we're not. We are personalists. That means everyone has their individuality, everyone has their own unique contribution towards Krishna. And also, those who have taken initiation have received such a nice spiritual name from their spiritual master. So they would like to be addressed by their name as well. So I think that's very important. So again, in order to develop deep association, I think it starts by learning people's names, and then the nectar of instruction goes deeper into how you can develop deep relationship with devotees, like sharing your mind in confidence, listening to their mind in confidence, offering gifts, receiving gifts, offering prasada, receiving prasada. This is how you can develop really deep, meaningful relationship with the other devotees. Which is another thing that attracted me towards Krishna consciousness, is just being part of a society and having deep, meaningful relationships. Because you find when you have friendships in the material world, that it's not very deep and meaningful generally, and you don't have the same level of connection. All right, so then we'll move on to, I know we're running short on time, so I will come into the final 3 takeaways of this verse. So the first one, which we mentioned already, the first takeaway is that one becomes advanced by hearing about Krishna, or Shravanam. So when we think about the 9-step process of devotional service, the first 3 steps, Shravanam, Kirtanam, and Vishnu Smaranam, are the most important. So in English, that's hearing, chanting, and remembering of Vishnu. Out of these 3, which one is the most important? Yes, hearing, or Shravanam. So Shravanam is the most important of the 9-step devotional service. So if you cannot hear, meaning listening, reading, actively listening, then it's very difficult to progress. The second key takeaway is one must be non-envious to hear properly. So now we've established that hearing is the most important. So the next step is that you yourself need to be non-envious. Non-envious means it's not that easy. Everybody thinks they're non-envious, but it's actually very hard to be non-envious. Non-envious means you do not desire anything, even if you see someone achieving better than you, or you see somebody catching up to your level. It means, especially when you're hearing or you're understanding from someone, you should not be envious of them, especially Krishna. What to speak of other devotees. We mentioned that faith is a prerequisite for receiving this knowledge. So Arjuna accepted Krishna as a spiritual master. And the last, but not least, takeaway from this verse is that one becomes free from material miseries when cultivating devotional practices. So as Krishna mentions in the verse, one becomes free from material miseries, as we mentioned, the 3-fold miseries, through this pure unalloyed devotion. And what Prabhupada mentions in this verse, in the purport, is that when you do practice pure, unalloyed devotion with sincerity, that brings you to the transcendental plane. And then the transcendental plane means you're in the spiritual plane. And then from there, you have liberation from the material world. So what does that mean? It means that you have liberation from material sense gratification, sense objects, that you're able to live in a very pure manner. Okay, so those are my three major takeaways from the verse. I'd like to once again thank everyone, and apologies if there was any offenses made. I'd like to give special thanks to those who have come specifically to support me today, so thank you very much, and hope you have a good rest of the program. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Does anyone have any questions? Okay, any questions? I hope this inspires everyone to read on chapter 9. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Comment.
Any comments?
Comment is very nicely done, very nicely explained. Thank you very much.
Any reflection of what was your main takeaway from the class? Sorry. Yeah.
I see the unalloyed devotion.
Mhm.
That's mentioned Bhagavatam and Rupa Goswami's books everywhere. So unalloyed is a very, very important word. Small word, but a big meaning.
Yes, thank you very much.
Very good, thank you.
Shall we go?
Any other reflections? Anyone want to share what their main takeaway was?
Somebody
How
else
come
did.
he's not asking any question?
Somebody else did. Somebody else did.
Sunny, Sunny Prabhu is
Sorry,
Hare Krishna Mataji. Your very first class was really nice. And this is a stepping stone to build up your real confidence to give you the insight of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Thank you very much once again.
Hare Krishna, thank you. Okay.
I think you can give a chance for Sunny Prabhu.
You're being cornered. Sunny Prabhu, you're being cornered.